My parents demanded I tear down the funeral preparations for my late daughter to host my brother-in-law's wedding. Mom screamed, "Dead people don't need parties, the living do." Dad added, "Your grief is ruining our family's joy." Sister declared, "My wedding matters more than your dead kid." They refused to take no for an answer, so they arrived with 300 wedding guests and heavy excavators to forcibly destroy my child's sacred memorial garden. They didn't know my revenge would be televised live. My name is Elena, and this is about the day my family showed me their true colors, and how I made sure the whole world saw them too. It all started 3 years ago when my daughter Clara was diagnosed with leukemia at age 7. She was the light of my life, this incredible little girl who loved butterflies, painting, and making everyone around her smile even when she was going through hell. My husband Eric and I spent every moment we could at the hospital, watching our baby girl fight a battle no child should ever have to face. Clara passed away on a Tuesday morning in March, just 2 weeks before her 9th birthday. She slipped away peacefully in her sleep, holding my hand and Eric's. Her last words were asking if we could have a butterfly party for her in the garden she loved so much, our backyard where she'd spent countless hours chasing monarchs and painting pictures of flowers. The grief was suffocating. Eric and I could barely function, but we knew we had to honor Clara's final wish. We spent the next month transforming our backyard into the most beautiful memorial garden you've ever seen. We planted her favorite flowers, sunflowers, marigolds, and purple petunias. We commissioned a local artist to create a stunning butterfly sculpture as the centerpiece. We built raised garden beds spelling out Clara with white roses. Every detail was chosen with love, every plant placed with purpose. The memorial service was planned for May 12th, what would have been Clara's 9th birthday. We'd invited close family and friends, about 50 people who truly loved Clara. My parents, Henry and Mabel, had been supportive during Clara's illness, or at least I thought they were. My sister Nora had been distant, but I assumed it was because she was planning her own wedding to Felix for later that year. 2 weeks before Clara's memorial service, Nora called me. I should have known something was wrong by her tone, this fake sweetness that didn't match the Nora I knew. "Elena, honey, I need to talk to you about something important," she said. "Felix and I have been thinking, and we've decided we want to move our wedding date up. We found this amazing photographer who's only available on May 15th, and you know how hard it is to find good vendors." I was confused. "Okay, that's great, Nora. I'm sure it'll be beautiful." "Well, the thing is, we were hoping we could use your backyard for the ceremony. It looks absolutely stunning with all those flowers and decorations you've put up." My blood ran cold. "Nora, that's Clara's memorial garden. Her service is on May 12th. You know that." I know, but hear me out," she continued, her voice getting more urgent. "Clara's gone, Elena. She's not coming back. But Felix and I are starting our lives together, and this could be such a beautiful beginning. Think about it, instead of a sad funeral, we could have a celebration of love and life." I was speechless. I literally couldn't form words. "Plus," Nora added, "Mom and Dad think it's a great idea. They're tired of all this death and sadness. They want something happy to focus on." I hung up on her. I actually hung up on my own sister. Within an hour, my mother was at my door. She didn't even wait for me to invite her in, she just pushed past me and started pacing around my living room. "Elena, you're being completely unreasonable," she said. "Nora explained the situation, and I think you need to seriously consider what's best for this family." "What's best for this family?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "Mom, we're talking about Clara's memorial service. Your granddaughter's memorial service." "And I loved Clara, you know I did," she said, but her tone was dismissive. "But she's gone, sweetheart. Dead people don't need parties, the living do. Nora and Felix are starting their marriage, and they need our support." I stared at her in disbelief. "Gab! Elena, get out!" I screamed, louder than I'd ever screamed at anyone in my life. She left, but not before giving me this look that said she thought I was being completely irrational. The next day, my father called. Dad had always been the more reasonable parent, or so I thought. He used the same talking points as Mom, but with his usual logical approach. "Elena, I understand you're grieving," he said. "But your grief is ruining our family's joy. Nora's only getting married once, and you're destroying her happiness over a dead child." "A dead child?" He called Clara a dead child. "Nora has already sent out new invitations," he continued. "She's expecting 200 guests on May 12th, and she's counting on using your property. The whole family is excited about this wedding, and you're the only one standing in the way." I hung up on him too. For the next week, they tag-teamed me with phone calls, texts, and surprise visits. The pressure was relentless. Every morning I'd wake up to voicemails from my mother, every afternoon brought texts from Nora, And every evening my father would call with new logical arguments about why I should change my mind. The worst part was how they tried to manipulate Eric. My husband had been my rock through Clara's illness and death, but he'd always been close to my family. They knew he was vulnerable in his grief, so they started calling him directly. "Eric, you need to talk sense into Elena," my mother told him during one of these calls. "She's not thinking clearly. This obsession with the memorial is unhealthy. Clara wouldn't want her mother to be so consumed with death." Eric came to me after that call, looking conflicted. "Elena, I love you, and I want to honor Clara just as much as you do. But maybe we should consider if there's a compromise here. What if we move the memorial service to the cemetery? Or had it at the church?" I felt like I was drowning. Even my own husband was starting to question whether I was being reasonable. "Eric, Clara specifically asked for a butterfly party in our garden." Those were her exact words. "Mama, when I go to heaven, can we have a butterfly party in the garden? How can I break that promise?" He held me while I cried, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. My family was slowly poisoning everyone against me. The manipulation escalated when Nora recruited Clara's best friend's mother, Hazel, to their cause. Hazel called me crying, saying that Nora had told her I was being selfish and that little Millie was heartbroken about potentially missing the memorial service. "Elena, I don't understand what's happening," Hazel said through tears. "Nora says you're trying to make everyone choose between Clara's memorial and her wedding. Millie has been looking forward to releasing butterflies for Clara. Can't you find a way to make this work for everyone?" I realized then that Nora had been lying to people, telling them I was the one creating the conflict. She was painting herself as the victim, as if I was somehow forcing her to choose between her wedding and her niece's memorial. "Hazel, that's not what's happening at all," I explained. "Nora wants to have her wedding reception in Clara's memorial garden, on the same day as the memorial service. I never said anyone had to choose between anything." But the damage was done. Nora had gotten to people first, spinning the story to make me look like the unreasonable one. Several of Clara's friends' families called to ask if the memorial service was still happening, confused by the conflicting information they were receiving. That's when I decided to document everything. I started recording phone calls, legal in my state with one-party consent, taking screenshots of text messages, and keeping detailed notes of every interaction with my family. Something told me I was going to need evidence of what was really happening. The breaking point came when my parents showed up at my house with my Aunt Margaret and Uncle George. They clearly briefed them on their version of events because Margaret immediately started lecturing me about family unity and letting go of the past. "Elena, sweetheart, we understand you're hurting," Margaret said, settling herself on my couch like she was planning to stay a while. "But Clara is with the angels now. She doesn't need earthly celebrations. Nora and Felix are building a life together, and they need our support." "Did you know Clara?" I asked her directly. "Did you visit her during her treatment? Did you call her on her birthday? Did you send her cards when she was in the hospital?" Margaret looked uncomfortable. The truth was, most of my extended family had barely acknowledged Clara's existence, let alone her battle with cancer. They'd sent a few obligatory cards and flowers, but they hadn't been part of her life. "That's not the point," Uncle George interjected. "The point is that you're tearing this family apart over a dead child." There it was again. A dead child. As if Clara had never been more than an inconvenience. "Get out," I said quietly. "Elena, we're just trying to help. Get out." I screamed, louder than I had at my mother. "All of you, get out of my house right now." They left, but not before my father delivered one final threat. "Elena, if you don't start being reasonable, you're going to find yourself very alone in this world. Family is all you have, and you're destroying it over nothing." Over nothing. My daughter's memory was nothing to them. That night, Eric and I had our worst fight since Clara's death. The stress and manipulation had gotten to him, and he was starting to crack under the pressure. "Maybe they have a point," he said during dinner. "Maybe we are being too rigid about this. Clara loved Nora. She wouldn't want us to fight with family over her memorial." "Clara also loved butterflies and gardens and birthday parties," I replied. "She asked for this specific thing, Eric. She asked for a butterfly party in our garden. But she's not here to see it," he said, and immediately regretted the words. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see in his eyes that he knew he'd crossed a line, but the damage was done. Even my husband was starting to prioritize the living over Clara's memory. I spent that night in Clara's room, surrounded by her artwork and stuffed animals, trying to figure out how everyone I loved could be so wrong about something so important. I found her journal from the hospital, the one her child life specialist had encouraged her to keep during treatment. In her shaky 8-year-old handwriting, she'd written, "When I go to heaven, I want Mama and Daddy to have a party for me in the garden. I want butterflies and flowers and all my friends to come. I want them to be happy and remember the good times we had. She'd drawn pictures of the butterfly party she imagined, stick figures of her family and friends standing in a garden full of flowers, with butterflies everywhere. In every picture, she'd drawn herself as an angel watching from above, smiling. That's when I knew I couldn't compromise. This wasn't about me or my grief or my stubbornness. This was about keeping a promise to my dying daughter. The next morning, I called Nora and tried one more time to reason with her. "Nora, I found Clara's journal from the hospital," I said. "She wrote about wanting a butterfly party in the garden. She drew pictures of it. This meant everything to her." "Elena, she was 8 years old and dying," Nora replied coldly. "She didn't understand what she was asking for. You're the adult here. You need to make adult decisions." "What adult decision would you make?" I asked. "If Millie was dying and asked you for something specific, would you honor it or would you let someone else override it?" Nora was quiet for a moment, and I thought maybe I'd gotten through to her. But then she said something that shattered any remaining hope I had for our relationship. "That's different, and you know it. Millie is actually my child. Clara was just... well, she's gone now. And I'm still here, still part of this family, still trying to build a life. You needed to decide what's more important, your dead daughter or your living sister." I hung up and immediately called Eric at work. "I need you to come home," I said. "I need you to listen to something." When he arrived, I played him the recording of Nora's call. I watched his face change as he heard his sister-in-law dismiss Clara as just gone and demand that I choose between my dead daughter and my living sister. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "I can't believe she said that." "This is who they really are," I told him. "This is what they really think of Clara. She was never a person to them, she was just an obligation, an inconvenience, something to be dealt with and then forgotten." Eric pulled me into his arms, and I felt him crying against my shoulder. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry I ever doubted you. You're right. We have to honor Clara's wishes, no matter what they do." 2 days later, my mother called with what she claimed was their final offer. "Elena, we've talked to a lawyer," she said. "Because we helped guarantee your mortgage when you bought the house, we may have some legal standing here. But we don't want to take this to court. So here's what we're willing to do: you can have your little memorial service in the morning, and then Nora can have her wedding reception in the afternoon. Everyone gets what they want." "Mom, that's not how memorial services work," I said. "Clara's friends and family are coming to honor her memory. They're not going to want to stick around for a wedding reception in the same spot where we just said goodbye to an 8-year-old. Then they can leave," she said matter-of-factly. "The people who matter will stay for Nora's wedding." The people who matter. Apparently, Clara's friends, teachers, doctors, and nurses didn't matter as much as Nora's wedding guests. "And what about the decorations?" I asked. "Clara's butterfly sculpture? The garden beds spelling out her name? The memorial displays?" "We'll work around them," Mom said. "Or move them temporarily. It's just decorations, Elena. It's not like Clara is actually there." That's when I realized they truly didn't understand what they were asking. They saw Clara's memorial garden as party decorations that could be moved around for convenience. They had no concept of sacred space, of honoring memory, of respecting grief. "No," I said firmly. "The answer is no. Clara's memorial service is happening on May 15th in our garden, exactly as planned. If Nora wants to get married that day, she'll need to find another location." "Elena, you're making a huge mistake," Mom warned. "You're choosing a dead child over your living family. When you're old and alone, don't come crying to us." I hung up and immediately called a security company to make sure our cameras were working properly. Something told me I was going to need them. The week before the memorial service, strange things started happening. I noticed cars driving slowly past our house, people taking pictures of the garden from the street. Nora's friends were posting cryptic messages on social media about family drama and selfish people. Then Eric's brother Cole called. He worked as a producer at the local news station, and he'd been helping us set up the live stream for Clara's memorial service. "Elena, I'm hearing rumors around town about some kind of family conflict involving Clara's memorial," he said. "Are you okay? Is there anything I should know about?" I told him everything. About Nora's demands, my parents' threats, the manipulation and pressure. Cole listened quietly, and when I finished, he was silent for a long moment. "Elena, I want you to know that whatever happens, I've got your back," he said. "Clara was my niece too, and what you're doing to honor her memory is beautiful. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for keeping your promise to her." Then he said something that would prove to be prophetic. "I have a feeling this story is bigger than just our family. People need to know that there are still parents out there who will fight for their children's memory, even when everyone around them has forgotten." The night before the memorial service, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Clara's last days, about the promises I'd made to her, about the garden we'd created together in our minds while she was too sick to go outside. I went out to the garden at midnight, sat next to her butterfly sculpture, and talked to her like I did every night. "Clara, baby, tomorrow is your butterfly party," I whispered. "I know there's going to be some drama, but I promise you, nothing is going to stop us from celebrating your life exactly the way you wanted. Mommy's going to keep her promise, no matter what." The butterfly sculpture seemed to shimmer in the moonlight, and for just a moment, I could swear I felt Clara's presence there with me, telling me everything was going to be okay. I had no idea how right she was. "Look, Elena," she said, flipping through pages of white dresses and flower arrangements. "My wedding matters more than your dead kid's party." That sounds harsh, but it's the truth. Clara's not going to know the difference, but my marriage will be ruined if I can't have the perfect wedding. But perhaps what made Nora's transformation even more painful was remembering who she used to be. Before Clara got sick, Nora had been the fun aunt who took Clara on special outings and bought her art supplies. When Clara was first diagnosed, Nora had even offered to be tested as a potential bone marrow donor. She'd sat with me in waiting rooms during Clara's treatments and had cried genuine tears when we got bad news from doctors. But as Clara's illness progressed and the reality of her prognosis became clear, Nora started pulling away. She visited less frequently, made more excuses about being busy with wedding planning, and seemed increasingly uncomfortable around Clara's medical equipment and medications. I chalked it up to stress and fear. Not everyone knows how to handle a child's terminal illness. Now I realized that somewhere along the way, Nora had stopped seeing Clara as her beloved niece and started seeing her as an obstacle to her own happiness. The transformation was complete when she stood in my living room, dismissing Clara's memory like it was a minor inconvenience. "Besides," Nora added, "Felix's family is very traditional. They expect a certain level of elegance, and your little garden setup is perfect. It just needs to be repurposed for something more appropriate." More appropriate. As if honoring my daughter's memory wasn't appropriate. But I held firm. I told them no, over and over again. The memorial service was happening on May 15th, exactly as planned. Clara's friends from the hospital were coming. Her teachers, her doctors, her nurses, people who actually loved her and wanted to celebrate her life. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. On the morning of May 12th, I woke up at dawn to put finishing touches on the memorial garden. Eric was already outside, adjusting the butterfly sculpture and making sure every flower was perfect. We'd hired a small catering company to provide light refreshments, and the minister who'd baptized Clara was arriving at 2 p.m. to lead the service. At 10 a.m., I heard vehicles pulling into my driveway. Multiple vehicles. I looked out the window and saw a large moving truck, followed by trucks loaded with wedding decorations, catering equipment, and what looked like a portable dance floor. There was also a smaller excavation vehicle, not the massive construction equipment I'd initially thought, but still clearly meant for landscaping work. My parents' car was leading this convoy, followed by Nora and Felix in a rented luxury sedan decorated with white ribbons. Behind them were about 30 cars, early arriving wedding guests, apparently coming to help with setup. I ran outside in my pajamas, Eric right behind me. "What the hell is this?" I screamed at my parents as they got out of their car. "We tried to do this the easy way," my mother said, adjusting her outfit. She was already dressed for a wedding. "But you refused to be reasonable, so we're doing it the hard way. You can't just destroy Clara's memorial service." "Watch us," my father said, signaling to the excavator operators. "We've already paid these men to clear out all this funeral nonsense and set up properly for Nora's wedding. The guests are here, the minister is coming, and this is happening whether you like it or not." I watched in horror as the first excavator started moving toward Clara's garden. The driver looked uncomfortable, but he'd been paid to do a job. "Stop!" I screamed, running toward the machine. "You can't do this. This is my property." "Actually," Nora said, walking up behind me in her wedding dress. She was already in her wedding dress at 10 a.m. "Mom and Dad helped guarantee the mortgage when you bought this house. We've consulted with a lawyer about our options if you won't be reasonable." The legal situation was more complicated than I'd initially understood, but Eric and I were still the sole owners according to the deed. "Besides," Felix added, adjusting his tie, "we have 200 guests arriving in 4 hours. You can't possibly expect us to disappoint all these people because you're too selfish to share your backyard for one day." The excavation vehicle was now just feet from Clara's butterfly sculpture. I could see the operator hesitating, looking between the machine and the beautiful memorial garden. Several of the early wedding guests were standing around awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with the situation but unsure what to do. That's when I remembered the security cameras. 6 months earlier, during Clara's treatment, we'd installed a comprehensive security system after some break-ins in the neighborhood. But more importantly, just a week ago, Eric's brother, who works in local television news, had helped us set up a live streaming camera system to broadcast Clara's memorial service for friends and family who couldn't attend in person. The cameras were already rolling. They'd been scheduled to start broadcasting at 1 p.m., but Eric had turned them on early to test the system. Everything that was happening, my parents' betrayal, Nora's wedding dress, the excavators positioning to destroy Clara's memorial garden, the 300 wedding guests standing around like this was all perfectly normal. All of it was being broadcast live on social media and picked up by Eric's brother's news station. I realized I had a choice. I could continue screaming and crying while they destroyed everything Clara had wanted, or I could let the world see exactly who these people really were. I made my choice. Eric, I called to my husband, loud enough for the cameras to pick up. Can you make sure the live stream is getting all of this? I want everyone to see what my family is doing to Clara's memorial service. It's all being recorded and broadcast live, Eric replied, understanding immediately. Your brother Cole at Channel 7 has been monitoring our stream as part of their community coverage program. It's currently being watched by about 800 people, and the numbers are climbing. I saw my mother's face go pale. What stream? Elena, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that everyone is watching this right now, I said, looking directly into the main camera. Everyone can see my parents bringing excavators to destroy my 8-year-old daughter's memorial garden so my sister can have her wedding reception in the same spot where we plan to honor Clara's memory. Nora stepped forward, clearly not understanding the situation. Elena, you're being ridiculous. No one cares about your little internet thing. Actually, Eric said, checking his phone, we're up to 2,000 viewers now, and Cole says the local news is starting to pick it up. People are sharing the stream link on social media. That's when I decided to tell the whole story. On camera. Live. For everyone to see. My name is Elena Palmer, I said, looking directly into the camera. 3 months ago, my 8-year-old daughter Clara died of leukemia. Her last wish was to have a butterfly party in our backyard garden. Today is her birthday, she would have been 8 years old. We planned a beautiful memorial service to honor her memory. I gestured toward the memorial garden, where the excavators were still idling. My sister Nora decided she wanted to have her wedding in the same spot, on the same day. When I said no, my parents decided to override my decision by bringing heavy machinery to destroy Clara's memorial garden and replace it with wedding decorations. They're doing this while 300 wedding guests watch. The camera captured everything. My mother frantically trying to signal the excavator operators to stop. Nora arguing with Felix about whether they should proceed. The wedding guests standing around looking increasingly uncomfortable as they realized they were part of something deeply wrong. But I wasn't done. I want everyone to hear exactly what my family said about my daughter, I continued. My mother told me, and I quote, dead people don't need parties, the living do. My father said, your grief is ruining our family's joy and called Clara a dead child. My sister Nora told me, my wedding matters more than your dead kid. The live chat was growing steadily. People were horrified. The viewer count was climbing, 5,000, 8,000, 12,000 people watching my family's cruelty in real time as the story spread across social media platforms. And now, I said, my voice getting stronger, they've brought excavators and 300 wedding guests to forcibly destroy my child's memorial garden because they think their celebration is more important than honoring a little girl who fought cancer for 8 months and died asking for a butterfly party. That's when Nora finally understood what was happening. She looked at her phone and saw the notifications flooding in, people tagging her social media accounts, her friends messaging her, her employer calling. Turn off the cameras. She screamed. Turn them off right now. I can't, I said calmly. These are Clara's cameras. This is Clara's day. And now everyone gets to see who you really are. The excavation operator had shut off his machine and was walking away. He wanted no part of what was clearly becoming a public relations nightmare. We're not doing this, he called out. Lady, you can keep your money. I'm not destroying a kid's memorial garden on camera. The wedding guests were starting to leave. Felix's family, these supposedly traditional, elegant people, were mortified. His mother was crying. His father was yelling at Felix for bringing them into this situation. But Nora wasn't giving up. She was screaming at me, at Eric, at the camera operators, at anyone who would listen. This is my wedding day. She shrieked. I've planned this for 2 years. Elena is ruining everything out of spite. Out of spite? I repeated. Nora, you're trying to have your wedding reception in the spot where my daughter asked to be remembered. You're literally standing on Clara's memorial garden in your wedding dress, screaming about how your party is more important than her life. The live viewers were now over 20,000 as the story continued to spread. The story was being picked up by regional news outlets. #Clara's Garden was starting to trend locally on social media. People were sharing photos of Clara that I'd posted during her treatment, contrasting them with the footage of Nora in her wedding dress demanding to use the memorial garden. My parents tried a different approach. They walked up to the camera, trying to look reasonable and concerned. "We're just trying to help our daughter have a beautiful wedding," my father said. "Elena is still grieving, and she's not thinking clearly. We thought bringing the families together for a celebration would be healing." "Healing?" I said. "Dad, you called Clara a dead child. You said my grief was ruining the family's joy. Mom said dead people don't need parties. How is any of that healing?" The live chat was brutal. People were posting my parents' names, their business information, photos from their social media accounts. The internet had turned them into the villains of the day, which is exactly what they were. By 1 p.m., the original time for Clara's memorial service, most of the wedding guests had left. Felix's family looked mortified and confused. The vendors were packing up their equipment, though they still expected to be paid. Nora was sitting in her car crying, her wedding dress wrinkled from the morning's chaos. But the people who mattered started arriving. Clara's friends from the hospital came with their parents. Her teachers brought flowers. Her doctors and nurses came on their day off. The minister arrived exactly on time, despite the chaos. "Are we still having Clara's service?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said, looking at the memorial garden that was still intact, still beautiful, still perfect for honoring my daughter. "We're absolutely having Clara's service." And we did. With over 50,000 people watching online as the story continued to spread throughout the day, we held the most beautiful memorial service for Clara. We released butterflies, we shared stories about her courage and joy, we celebrated her life exactly as she would have wanted. Nora never got her wedding that day. The backup venue they scrambled to find was a community center that could accommodate their reduced guest list. Many people had simply gone home after witnessing the morning's events. The photographer stayed, but several vendors had clauses in their contracts about public incidents that affected their business reputation. The story gained momentum over the following weeks rather than going viral overnight. What started as a regional news story gradually spread to national outlets as more people shared Clara's story and expressed outrage at my family's behavior. My parents tried to do damage control, giving interviews to local news stations claiming they'd been misunderstood. But the footage spoke for itself. There was no misunderstanding their words, their actions, or their priorities. The story went national within several weeks. The footage was eventually shown on major news networks, discussed by legal experts, family therapists, and grief counselors. The hashtag Clara's Garden had spawned dozens of related hashtags, hashtag Children Matter, hashtag Honor Their Memory, hashtag Greatest Love. I was contacted by producers from every major talk show. Good Morning America, The Today Show, Ellen, Dr. Phil, everyone wanted to hear Clara's story and discuss what had happened to our family. At first, I was hesitant. This had never been about fame or attention. But then I realized Clara's story could help other families. My first television appearance was on Good Morning America. The host, Aaron Strahan, was incredibly gentle, asking about Clara's battle with cancer and her final wish. When they showed footage of the memorial garden, contrasted with clips of Nora in her wedding dress demanding to use the space, there wasn't a dry eye in the studio. "What would you say to other families who might be facing similar pressure to move on from their grief?" Henry asked. "I'd say that grief isn't something you get over," I replied. "It's something you carry with you, and honoring your child's memory isn't unhealthy, it's love. Clara asked for one thing, one simple request, and keeping that promise is how I show her that her life mattered." The response was overwhelming. The show's social media was flooded with messages from other parents who'd lost children, thanking me for speaking up. Many shared their own stories of family members who'd dismissed their children's memories or tried to rush them through grief. Dr. Lydia Williams, a renowned child psychologist, reached out to offer her expertise. She explained that what my family had done was a form of disenfranchised grief, when society tells mourners that their loss doesn't deserve recognition or that they should get over it quickly. "What Elena's family did was extraordinarily cruel," Dr. Williams said during a joint interview we did. "They not only dismissed Clara's dying wish, but they attempted to erase her memory for their own convenience. This kind of behavior causes lasting trauma to grieving parents." The legal implications were also significant. Property law experts weighed in on the ownership issue, and it turned out my parents' claim to any ownership rights was questionable at best. Their names were on the original mortgage as guarantors, but the deed clearly listed Eric and me as the sole owners. A lawyer contacted me pro bono to help ensure the property dispute was resolved definitively in our favor. But the most powerful response came from the medical community. Dr. Anika Rao, Clara's primary oncologist, gave an interview about the importance of honoring children's final wishes. "Clara was one of the bravest children I've ever treated," she said. "She faced her illness with incredible courage and grace. Her final wish for a butterfly party wasn't just about celebrating her life, it was about giving her parents a way to continue loving her after she was gone. To dismiss that wish as unimportant is to dismiss Clara herself. The children's hospital where Clara had been treated reached out about creating a memorial garden in her honor. Other families dealing with childhood cancer started sharing their own stories of how they'd honored their children's memories. A movement began, with parents across the country creating butterfly gardens and memorial spaces for their lost children. Eric and I decided to start the Clara's Wings Foundation, dedicated to supporting families dealing with childhood cancer and helping them create meaningful memorials for their children. The donations poured in, not just money, but time, materials, and expertise from people who'd been moved by Clara's story. Local businesses stepped up in ways that amazed me. The nursery where we bought Clara's flowers donated enough plants to create memorial gardens for 50 other families. A local sculptor offered to create butterfly sculptures for any family who wanted one. A grief counselor specialized in childhood loss offered free services to families in our area. The foundation's first project was creating a children's memorial garden at the hospital where Clara had been treated. We worked with other families to design a space where children could play and remember their siblings or friends who lost their battles with cancer. The centerpiece was a larger version of Clara's butterfly sculpture, surrounded by flowers that bloomed year-round. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from children. Schools across the country started butterfly release ceremonies to honor students who died. Children sent drawings and letters about Clara, sharing their own experiences with loss and how her story had helped them understand that it was okay to be sad and to remember people they'd lost. A little girl named Olive, who was 7 years old and battling the same type of leukemia Clara had faced, sent me a picture she'd drawn of Clara as an angel surrounded by butterflies. Her mother included a note saying that Clara's story had given Olive hope and courage during her treatment. The interview requests kept coming, but I was selective about which ones I accepted. I wanted to make sure Clara's story was being told respectfully, not sensationalized for entertainment. Dr. Phil's show reached out about doing a family intervention with my parents and Nora, but I declined. This wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about honoring Clara and helping other families. One of the most powerful interviews I did was with Anderson Cooper. He'd lost his brother at a young age and understood the complexity of family grief. During our conversation, he asked about forgiveness. "Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive your family for what they did?" he asked. "I think about that every day," I replied honestly. "I don't know if I can forgive them for what they said about Clara, for calling her a dead child and dismissing her memory. But I hope someday I can forgive them for their own sake, not because they deserve it, but because carrying that anger hurts me more than it hurts them." The foundation grew steadily over the following months. Within the first year, we'd helped create memorial gardens in 8 states and provided support to over 100 families dealing with childhood cancer. We partnered with hospitals, schools, and community organizations to ensure that no family felt alone in their grief. 1 year after Clara's memorial service, we held the first annual Butterfly Release Day. Families from across the country gathered in their local memorial gardens to release butterflies in honor of children who died. The event was live-streamed globally, with participants from 6 different countries joining in. That day, standing in Clara's garden surrounded by hundreds of butterflies and dozens of families who understood our loss, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Clara's death: peace. Not the absence of grief, but the presence of love that was stronger than loss. Eric and I started speaking at medical conferences about the importance of supporting families after loss. We trained hospital staff on how to talk to grieving parents and how to help them create meaningful memorials. The response from healthcare workers was incredible. Many shared their own experiences of seeing families struggle with unsupportive relatives or communities that wanted them to move on too quickly. The Clara's Wings Foundation also began advocating for legislative changes to protect families' rights to grieve and memorialize their children. We worked with lawmakers on what would eventually become the Children's Memorial Protection Act, a process that we knew would take several years but was important for future families facing similar situations. Through all of this, my family remained conspicuously silent. They'd initially tried to give their side of the story to a few local news outlets, but their interviews had backfired spectacularly. Watching my mother on camera, trying to explain why she thought dead people don't need parties, had only made public opinion more firmly against them. Nora and Felix had moved to Arizona several months after their small wedding, unable to deal with the ongoing attention and judgment in our hometown. Felix's career in finance had been affected. While he hadn't lost his job, he'd been passed over for a promotion that he'd been expecting, and he suspected the negative publicity had played a role. My parents had experienced significant social consequences in our small town. Their gift shop downtown had lost considerable business after the story spread locally, and they eventually decided to sell it and move to a retirement community in Florida where they could start fresh. Part of me felt sad about how completely our family had been destroyed. But then I'd remember Clara's journal, her drawings of the butterfly party she'd imagined, and I knew I'd made the right choice. Some things are more important than family harmony, and a mother's promise to her dying child is one of them. The anniversary of Clara's death was difficult, but it was also meaningful in ways I hadn't expected. Instead of grieving alone, Eric and I were surrounded by a community of people who understood our loss and supported our efforts to honor Clara's memory. The foundation had grown into something beautiful and lasting, a way for Clara's brief life to continue making a difference in the world. The butterfly sculpture in Clara's garden became a pilgrimage site for grieving parents. People from all over the country started sending donations to maintain the garden and support other families like ours. Nora and Felix eventually got married 6 months later in a small ceremony with just immediate family, though my parents and I weren't invited. They moved to another state shortly afterward, unable to deal with the ongoing attention from their actions that day. My relationship with my parents never recovered. How could it? They'd shown me that their priorities were completely backwards, that their desire for a party mattered more than honoring their granddaughter's memory. They'd said things that could never be unsaid, done things that could never be undone. The most ironic part? If Nora had simply asked to have her wedding on a different date, or in a different location, I would have supported her completely. If they'd approached this with love and understanding instead of demands and ultimatums, we could have found a solution that honored both Clara's memory and Nora's marriage. But instead, they chose to show the world exactly who they really were. And the world was watching. Clara would have turned 9 years old that day. Instead of spending it grieving alone, I spent it surrounded by people who truly loved her, sharing her story with hundreds of thousands of strangers who were moved by her courage and outraged by my family's cruelty. In a way, Clara got the biggest butterfly party anyone could have imagined. She got a celebration that reached people all over the world, that inspired others to be kinder to grieving families, that raised awareness about childhood cancer, and that proved her little life had mattered more than any wedding ever could. The memorial garden still stands in our backyard, more beautiful than ever. We've expanded it over the years, adding new flowers and features donated by people who were touched by Clara's story. The butterfly sculpture remains the centerpiece, catching sunlight and casting dancing shadows across the flowers Clara loved. Sometimes I sit there in the evenings and tell Clara about her day, about how the whole world watched her butterfly party, about how she managed to teach so many people about love, loss, and what really matters in life. I think she would have loved knowing that her story helped other families, that her memory inspired kindness, and that her butterfly party was seen by more people than any wedding could ever reach. My family demanded I tear down my daughter's memorial to make room for their celebration. Instead, they ended up giving Clara the most incredible celebration of all, one that will be remembered long after any wedding would have been forgotten. And that's a revenge I never could have planned, but one that Clara deserved completely.